This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, and welcome back to the Rebel Author Podcast. If you're not already part of my Facebook group, then I want to very unsubtly persuade you to join. Every Monday, at some point on Monday, because I'm notorious for doing it late at night, but hey, what? It's Monday somewhere. I post a thread asking members for their weekly goals. The following Monday, we review and post our new goals. Everyone joins in and it's super supportive. We literally get hundreds and hundreds of comments each week. There's also loads of banter, which we all know I love a bit of banter. And members also ask all kinds of questions in the forum on topics from craft, marketing and publishing. And I also do the occasional Facebook Live Q&A session. I love the accountability of having to post and then confess whether or not I've reached my goals. I'm currently trying to finish the third book in my YA fantasy series called Trey by the end of October so that I can actually join in Nano for once. And the project I'm going to do in Nano is The Anatomy of Prose, my next nonfiction book, which I am desperate to get out for the new year. So, if you'd like to join my Facebook group, you can by going to facebook.com/groups/13, which is the number, so 13 STE. Thank you to new patron this week, Amy Sund. Don't forget, you can get early access to all the episodes on Patreon, as well as exclusive content on writing, marketing, and publishing. You can do that by visiting www.patreon.com/Sasha Black, and that is Sasha with a C, SACHA, and then Black. So on to Listener Rebel of the Week. This week, it's Christine. Christine says, my father always thought education was wasted on women. All women do is get married and have babies, right? No. Okay, I will stop narrating. Christine went to university, earned her honours degree in engineering, worked as a design and development engineer in the defence industry, and did lots of other work over the years. Eventually, she walked away because she didn't like holding down a proper job. That's a good fuck you to the man. She stepped off the treadmill and moved to Spain, and now she earns her living as a writer, living in her renovation project of a villa surrounded by her rescue dogs and cats. Aww. If you'd like to find out more about Christine, you can go to www.facebook.com/perfume, petals and thorns. If you would like to be a Listener Rebel of the Week, then you can tweet me at rebelauthorpod or email in at rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. And on with the interview. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. I'm Sasha Black and I am here today with Boni Wagner-Stafford. Boni is an author, author coach, writer, ghostwriter, editor and co-founder of Ingenium Books. She's a communications manager for the Alliance of Independent Authors, an award-winning former journalist, and has led public sector teams in media relations, issues management and strategic communications and planning. Cool, that's a mouthful. Boni has been at the controls of a helicopter, loves backcountry canoeing, once jumped from an aeroplane, sang on stage with Andrea Botticelli? Bocelli? How do you say that, Boni?
Andrea Bocelli.
There you go.
Andrea Bocelli.
In a backup chorus, and grew up skiing in Canada's Rocky Mountains. She's lived in more than 15 different cities in Canada, France, and Mexico, and is found most often on her 40-foot sailboat, Ingenium, in Mexico's Sea of Cortez. That is 40 foot, isn't it?
That is 40 feet, yes.
Yeah, okay. I know nothing about boats, so I was like, is that 40 inches? 40 feet?
Yeah, 40 feet.
Welcome, Boni. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time this evening or your afternoon, as I know that you are in Mexico. Just for everybody listening, there is a bit of a time delay in the Wi-Fi. So if there are any pauses, that is why. So welcome, Boni.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Happy to be here and happy you're launching your new Rebel podcast.
Thank you. So tell me a bit about your journey into writing and why you write nonfiction particularly.
Well, that's a great question. I've always been a writer, like many authors and wannabe authors. I've always been interested in writing, starting with my grade, not even starting with, but, back when I had a grade 5 writing assignment that we were to create a story and characters, and I was right into the Nancy Drew series back then, and so I created this whole different Nancy Drew book. I made up the whole story, the whole mystery, the whole search, but I used the Nancy Drew characters. And so when I got to school to present this wonderful, what I thought was I was so proud of it. I had so much fun. Of course, I got a failing grade because I was off being so excited about thinking about Nancy Drew. I didn't hear the second half of the assignment, which was everything has to be totally original. So that kind of burst my bubble. But anyway, I went on to be a journalist, a reporter, and working in television and radio mainly, and dabbling in print. And, storytelling has just always been a part of my bones. And then the next phase of my career, I was in government communications. That's that mouthful of media relations, issues management, and strategic communications. But so I was always, while I was there, I was responsible for the editorial production and release of, 300-page budget documents and white papers on, tourism industry restructuring and all those kinds of things. But so everything I've always done, and maybe tracking back to that fateful grade 5 assignment where I failed on fiction, that I just feel I love nonfiction. I love true stories. I think they make the world go around, and it's just where I'm most comfortable. And I do have some fiction, historical fiction based on a true story. Of course, there always has to be that element of truth, but I do have some fiction in the works that I find very difficult. But so that's kind of how it all comes together.
So you started out your writing career writing fan fiction. I love that. I had no idea. I think that's brilliant. And also, so how did you feel about the corporate comms? I say this only kind of with a wry smile because I left corporate, what I like to call my corporate hellmare instead of a nightmare, because I just, I wasn't suited to the corporate lifestyle. So, but how long did you kind of spend in the corporate world?
11 years. And, it's interesting. And it was government, not, similar to corporate, but government. So public sector, very much about the public good, obviously with the political bent, because what was in the public good varied depending on which political party was in power. But my transition from being a reporter where I reported on government to then being inside representing the government was interesting. I realized once I was inside government that all my preconceived notions about what government was all about were not true. I won't get into all of those things, but government is a big fat cushy, everybody's lazy. I mean, the people that I worked with in the Ontario government in Canada were some of the smartest, hardest working people that I have ever met. And I was very fortunate to be working on things that I just found fascinating, securities regulation reform, municipal tax structures, tax administration, tobacco tax and related issues. I know it's horrible, but and then industry reforms and the debates that we would have around the board tables deciding what to do to address a particular social public or economic issue were just fascinating. I mean, it was really some of my most fun work, and I loved my journalistic work, but the communications work in government really went much deeper, and I loved it, and that is, I loved it until I didn't love it anymore, and I was ready to do something else. So that's kind of the same reason I left journalism. I loved it until I didn't love it anymore, and then I went to do something else, and I loved communications till I didn't love it anymore, and I went to do something else.
Well, so I say corporate. I was actually in government as well, which is why I'm kind of smiling back here. Nobody can see me grinning, but I'm kind of grinning because as much as you loved it, I hated it. But obviously, I'm very grateful that there are, because everybody that I worked with absolutely loved, those kind of debates in, for the societal good and stuff. I just wasn't suited to it. Right. Okay. Let's get into.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, for sure.
So we are here today to talk about one particular book that you've published, and kind of one particular area. So you published a book recently called 1 Million Readers, which I read and loved, by the way. So I wondered...
Thank you.
So, and just for everybody who hasn't read it, well, one, go and read it, but two, it's about marketing nonfiction. Now, whilst it's themed on marketing non-fiction particularly, I took a lot of things from it that I could apply to my fiction, but marketing and promotion. So, don't feel like you can't read it just because I'm saying it's about non-fiction. Now, one of the things that I learned, one of the very first things that I took from your book was about the difference between promotion and marketing. Now, I'd kind of up to that point been rolling them into one, and seeing them as the same thing, but they're not. So I wondered if you could tell listeners about the difference between marketing and promotion.
Yeah, great question. And, this became crystal clear for me just in the last couple of years, because I did the same thing, and I think it's a very common thing. But so I like to think of marketing as the umbrella, and promotion is one of the things you do under that marketing umbrella, but they are not interchangeable and they're not the same. And so marketing relates to everything that you do to spread the word about you as an author and about your book or books. Promotion is a very specific activity that you undertake when you want to sell a book. And they're connected, of course, because the marketing is what happens when you're fertilizing the ground. You're making sure you're creating the awareness. You're wanting people to know that you exist. That work has to be done before the promotion is going to work. But the marketing piece isn't all about selling. And this is, frankly, this is where a lot of indie authors get tripped up. And you hear complaints about, oh my God, this author keeps just, spamming me and saying, buy my book, buy my book. Well, that is exactly what's the problem, is that author has confused promotion with marketing. Nobody is going to buy a book from a promotion effort until you've done the marketing work to seed the ground with awareness about you and your book. Does that make sense, Sasha?
Yeah, no, it does, absolutely. And I think so there's a very famous phrase about 7 touches, or 7 times a potential customer needs to see a message from you, or come into contact with you, and that's obviously the marketing side to set up your promotion so it works. Yes. Yeah,
that's right. Yep. Yeah, and so marketing is about establishing credibility, creating awareness, making sure that you're providing a connection point. It's all of that stuff, and all of your promotion activity will be for naught if you aren't focusing on that marketing piece first. And that said, you can't only do the marketing piece either. At some point, you do have to say, hey, buy my book. So they go hand in hand, but the marketing piece really needs to be in place first before you embark on any kind of promotion.
So what would a couple of examples be then of marketing? So obviously the promotion is stuff like Facebook advertising or Amazon ads or, a social post that has a link to your book. But can you give me a couple of examples of what marketing would be without the promotion?
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not black and white. So you can engage and launch a series of Facebook ads that is about marketing. You can launch a series of, any kind of ads can be about marketing, not necessarily the promotion. Sometimes they can be combined. So it's not quite so black and white. But so the marketing pieces that I'm talking about and that 1 Million Readers talks about is really a framework and a mindset to strategically pull all the pieces together so that you're thinking about your book, the sales, whatever your definition of success is, in a holistic way, and that you take the time to think through and plan all of the activities that will be in your marketing bucket so they're coordinated, they make sense, and so that your promotion can be successful. So marketing is everything from defining a clear objective. What is it I want to achieve? Marketing, and this is my definition of marketing. You can talk to somebody else who's going to have a totally different thing. This is just what works for me and how I like to think of this. And so marketing, you might have a marketing budget, which is also where it's confusing because your promotion activities are going to go into your marketing budget if that's the way you're tracking your spend. It's how you write your website copy. It's the colors you choose for your website. It's the look and feel of your author photo. Are your eyes closed? Are you in black and white? Are you color? All of those things all come together under the marketing banner. They all have a message. And what your marketing strategy is going to do is bring all those things together so you know why you're choosing what color, you know why your eyes are open or closed, or you don't see your face at all, or whatever that is. If that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And I think the why behind a lot of the marketing is, for me personally, the most important part. And certainly around things like branding and color and building up, your author personality, I suppose. I think, almost everything of mine is purple. Even my author photo has purple.
I love purple.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. So my next question was around a concept that I've only ever heard once before outside of reading your book. And you went into quite a lot of detail, which is why I was so fascinated by it. But this is around the concept of selling a feeling to your readers and or customers. And I wondered, and it's selling a feeling rather than selling a product. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what that is, the concept, what it means, and what it means for authors in their planning and marketing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so not to discount the fact that at some point we all, as authors, need to say somewhere, buy my book, and that it is a product. This is not to discount that we are selling a product. What this is talking about is what we need to engage and think through as authors when we go through the motions, all of the many motions that we have to go through before we can be ready to sell that book and before a reader will say buy. So this notion of selling a feeling rather than a product is tied into the age-old, since millennia, we human beings are attracted by story. Stories affect us because they engage a feeling. They engage our emotions. Even the most intellectual, dry stuff. There is a feeling that we connect to. Now, I'm not talking about textbooks or anything like that, but I'll just put that aside for the moment. But And let me use an example not from the author world. And this, we had a conversation about this earlier this week. I have lived on my sailboat. I'm not on the sailboat today, but I will be again shortly. But so in the boat world, there are particular kind of sailboats that are suited to different kinds of people. And so there is one particular kind of sailboat that really is, it's very luxurious. The lines are clean. The interior is, the latest fashion and design. And the type of person that it would be interested in that kind of a sailboat is very different from the type of person who would be interested in a heavier, maybe a wooden type of sailboat that, is more about the adventure of sailing rather than comfort on the water. And your sales job with each of those two products has to engage different feelings, and you need to connect to your potential buyers with different feelings based on what that product is. So, and it's not overt. Let's say we're trying to sell boat number one. We're going to use words like, because the person that's interested in boat number one is more likely a woman than a man, is more likely less interested in the actual above deck sailing process and more interested in the beautiful sunsets, calmly sitting at anchor. And so the words we would use to try to promote and sell that boat would be luxury, comfort, safety. Those are words that evoke a feeling in the reader, but only in the target reader. The second boat that I talked about, that potential owner is not interested in comfort, luxury, and safety. This boat number two potential owner is interested in how fast the boat goes. Is there a plumb bow to cut through rough seas? We would never use the word rough seas to talk about selling boat number one, even though both boats will equally experience rough seas. So, we want to talk about adventure, plumb bows, how she, cuts through the sea, how, that sort of thing that taps into the emotion that each target reader is looking for. And so with our books, if you're writing crime thrillers, that the reader is looking for a little bit of an escape. They want to be entertained. They love the notion of a mystery. So you don't answer all their questions. You don't put the synopsis on the back of your book, for example, and you use words that will create the feeling that reader is looking for. And even, that's a fiction example. In a nonfiction example, even if it's something like, how to develop your personal brand, and become a better leader, the emotion that we're looking for there is one of a sense of, okay, accomplishment. I know, there's a clarifying feeling of, all right, I can do this. I know this is going to tell me what I need to know. And you need to try to tap into the feeling that reader is looking for, which is the reason that they would pick up your book in the first place.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was kind of, I couldn't help but, relate this back to myself and thinking even about the podcast. So,
yes.
What is the feeling that I want to give to listeners? Well, sweary, British, obviously in the writing world, a little bit cheeky, probably sarcastic, and rebellious, obviously. But then, yes, okay, it's about writing and marketing and creativity. Well, any kind of creativity in this industry, but you could look at and for listeners, both Boni and I do freelance work for the Alliance of Independent Authors, whereas if you go to their podcast, then it's much more professional. Not that I'm not being professional, but I'm going to drop a few F-bombs or whatever and it's fine. But it's about selling that different feeling.
I'm so glad you told me in advance.
Yeah. Oh no, you can say fuck. It's totally fine. But yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm so glad.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have said. Yeah. No, these all have explicit on them because I can't be censoring myself. But yeah. No, it's a different feeling. And actually, this is really important because I was thinking about how this, being self-aware and knowing the feeling that you create, whether it be with your podcast or with your books, helps you to find your tribe, to find your people, your readers. So just being self-aware about that, I think that's something I'm definitely going to take away and chew over.
And that's a good point too. The self-awareness piece, which is many people, whether it's authors or people, many people may not be explicitly aware of what the feeling is that connects them to a particular book when they are readers. And so the self-awareness piece is absolutely critical for this, because until you can envision it in yourself, when I want to go and pick up the latest Lee Child and read about Jack Reacher, I know exactly what feeling I'm after. I just want to shut my brain down. I want to be entertained. I can't sleep yet, but so I want to find out, where is he hitchhiking to now? But I'm going to choose a different book when I'm after a different feeling. But so as authors, we need to pay attention to what those feelings are in ourselves and look at how we interact with the books that we buy and that we read in order to identify what some of those feelings are. And then we apply those to our target reader and our books, and kind of understand what it is that we're trying to offer our readers, what feeling we want to create for them.
And kind of looking at this like a story, a book, because that's, I guess, how I relate most things. It's almost like a trope of marketing. It's like, what are the tropes of your marketing? When you think about the tropes of your book, that's kind of the feelings for that genre that you're trying to create. But actually, it's kind of bringing those up in under the umbrella of marketing and thinking about the tropes that you want to market to your readers. So yeah, my brain is going 10,000 miles per hour. I'm going to move on. Otherwise, I know I'm just going to be talking about this for an hour and everyone's going to be like, come on, Sasha. Okay,
we can come back and do another show about this.
Yeah, definitely. What's a market scan?
Oh, this is one of my favorites. It's actually, so from my corporate communications, government communications, I'm just going to call it corporate because you're so right, it's all corporate. But
boo.
Yeah, I know. Fuck, I'm glad I'm out of there.
Yeah.
I really am. When we were in corporate communications, before anything was ever going to go out to the public, whether it was an announcement about the cost of auto insurance, or whether it was announcing a new event at a tourism industry thing, or whatever it was, whenever anything was going out to the public, we always did what we called an environmental scan. And I've taken this notion and applied it to book marketing because I just found it so incredibly valuable. And so it is looking at, we're for the book purposes, we're talking about a market scan. I sometimes call it environmental scan. The two things are the same. But what it is a very purposeful look at the broader environment into which you are launching your book. And I consider everything being fair game, everything from socioeconomic considerations, like what's happening with the economy. Are people buying paperback books? Are they buying ebooks? Are people buying my genre of books, and why? Is my genre something considered a luxury, or in economic downturns, people are more concerned about the elements on the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example. So being able to connect the broader socioeconomic environment is going to help you decide not just your messages, your marketing messages, but how you're going to pitch it, what that feeling is that you're going to try to create. So if it's a real economic downturn, for example, and you're writing thrillers, but people might not have money for thrillers, you really want to emphasize that they sure want to escape. They sure want to escape. They don't want to be thinking about the bills that they can't pay right now. So you want to emphasize those emotional and those feeling connections with what the benefits are that they're going to get out of the book, for example. So that's one part of the market scan. The other part of the market scan is I always like to know what's going on in the publishing industry. Things are changing very fast. I want to make sure that I know, what kind of books are selling, what's happening with, which platform is working better, which format is, right now audiobooks are selling a lot. So that, and that's pretty standard. That won't change month to month. But if you're writing a book every year or two, then before I go to launch a book, I make sure that I'm touching those kinds of scenarios and make sure that I know what's happening. And then it gets to be more specific. If you have a book about, how doctors can heal from burnout on the job, then we're talking about the market scan is, what's the accepted level of wisdom right now about doctors and burnout, and you kind of look for where's the, who's doing the studies, who's talking about it, what are resources besides my book, or that people can go to try to get help from this, and make sure you know who else is talking about it and who you might want to connect with, who you might be competing with, where there might be opportunity. You look for conferences and events. If you have a book that is set in a particular geographic area, what's the latest thing that's happening in that area? Is your book set in France and all of a sudden the last 12 months have been occupied by the Yellow Jacket protests, and your book doesn't mention them at all, and it's apparently set last year, then you have a problem. That's not to do with marketing necessarily, but these are the kinds of things that a market scan and an environmental scan can help you do. They will also identify, as I mentioned, with the other resources, they'll identify gaps and potential places where you might want to take some marketing actions, and they can identify allies. So in addition to competitors, sometimes our competitors can actually be allies. So if I've written a book, let's use the same example about something to help doctors heal from burnout, and I discover through my market scan that there's this really cool physician that's on the speaker circuit, and he's talking about it in a new and different way. Well, I can connect with that person and say, hey, I think you might be interested in my book, and I think maybe there's some opportunities for us to work together. Would you like a copy of my book? I'm going to be in your area, or I see you're coming in my area. Can we sit and have a coffee? And then you never know how that might turn out, but maybe that guy then, he goes on his speaker circuit to the next speaker, and he holds up your book and says, I met this great author of this great book, and I want to, So the market scan is where you identify all those opportunities. If you're not doing your market scan, you're not looking for those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think that stands certainly for fiction and non-fiction. I don't think that is something that only non-fiction listeners should be doing. I think it's useful for fiction too, because, it's that contextual marketing. You can create local opportunities even in your area from your book, or national ones, or whatever, but there it is, looking for those extra opportunities, and so many authors don't do that, and it's an easy way to sell my books, really, frankly.
It is, and another piece of the market scan that I mentioned that is really, really important, and I do it every single time, and I do it with the authors that I work with as my clients as well, and that is a rigorous competitor scan. So I consider that under the bucket of a market scan, but when I first start working with a new author, and before we're even very far into the editorial side of the book, we're looking at 20 to 30 similar books, similar in the space, the subject matter, and we're looking at everything. We're looking at how old they are, how well they sell, what does the description look like, what does the cover look like, what's the price of the paperback and the ebook, how many reviews do they have, what's the average star rating, what are the reviews saying, who has provided the editorial review for that book. And it's this, it's all part of that competitor scan. On its own doesn't do anything if you're not prepared to take it into account and act on it. And acting on it means you're considering how the reader expects to see and find your book in this sea of all these similar places. So it should affect the choices choices you make for your cover. It'll affect your title. It'll certainly affect your pricing. And again, you might find both adversaries and allies in that search. Oh, so-and-so has written a book, but it was 5 years ago, but they're having some success. So perhaps I'm going to connect and, maybe and they've got lots of reviews. And so maybe I can get that person to review my book and promote my book. So it's all about connecting the dots. Really, it's making sure that you're not launching your book into a vacuum, that you are very, very clear and aware on what is happening in the world around you, the environment that you're launching your book into.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, and also just to say, there is so much more about this in Boni's book, and loads of kind of really tactical tips and tricks that I have written copious amounts of notes on that I need to go and process. So yeah, cheers for that. So many pages of notes. I'm like, they're all of the things I want to do. Okay, talk to the new author. What one or two things would you tell them, or lessons have you learnt perhaps through your own marketing? What would you tell them to do when preparing their marketing for their nonfiction book or fiction?
Yeah, it's really tough because I'm going back to my own first experience. It's tough because the hardest part of the book, we think, is the writing. And then all of a sudden we finish writing and we realize that, oh my God, it's not the hardest part at all. So I view my advice to new authors is to recognize that in all the benefits, and there are so many, of being an independent author and being in creative and commercial control with your own product, which is your book and your projects, is that marketing is a process. It is not a single event. It is a process, and it will be a part of what you do for the lifetime of your book. As long as you want to be getting attention for your book and selling some books, then you need to be engaged in marketing. And so that's the first piece of advice. And the second piece of advice is that I would take the time to do the strategy work. I don't know very many authors. I work with lots of authors, but it's not that I don't have a big circle of friends that are authors other than the people I'm working with, at Ally. But I'm not aware of very many authors that actually do this, the level of detailed planning and coming up with a marketing strategy that I'm advocating in 1 million readers. And that's what I would say is take the time, go through the book, or other people's. It doesn't have to be my book. There's lots of resources out there, but take the time to pull together your own version of a marketing strategy, because once you've done that work, you'll have things to do to keep your book alive and in front of your potential readers for potentially years to come. If you don't do this work at the beginning, you are going to go, oh, well, I launched a Facebook ad and I have some review readers. Why is my book not selling? I don't know what I should be doing today. If you do the work on the strategy up the front, you will never have to say, what should I be doing to market my book today? You will always know, and it will carry you through, a year, 2 years of marketing your book.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because I actually, and I did actually take genuinely copious amounts of notes, but then I got very overwhelmed by it. But I think that's a really key point that you just made, because actually I don't have to do all of those things immediately. I'm terrible for that. I just want to do them all now. I'm highly impatient, but actually that's such a good point, because the benefit of being an indie author is that we have control over the marketing, whereas most traditional publishers focus on that launch period and sort of the few weeks around it. Actually, I'm still marketing a book that I published 2 years ago, and if I had, a intensive detailed marketing plan, then I wouldn't have to be making this shit up every single day. I would go to my plan. So I have a book that I've got about 22k of notes at the moment. So after I finished my next fiction book, that's the book I'm focusing on. But it is nonfiction, and I did download your workbook, and I am going to go through it, because I think it will give my book the best opportunity to reach as many readers as possible. And I'm just going to keep that point in mind that actually, yes, I am going to come out with a metric fuckload of tasks, but I don't have to do them immediately, and therefore that should, I hope, take away the overwhelm of having such a big marketing plan. I think that's a great takeaway. I wanted to ask you about PR, because that is one thing that I had my kind of skeptical eyebrow raised when I was reading it, and I think this is perhaps just because I am ignorant about PR, but PR seems like one of these things that traditional publishers do, and they throw loads of money at it and nobody can really quantify it. But I think I know of indies who are starting to look at PR managers for themselves. So I wondered if you could just talk about what actually is PR and how that differs perhaps from the marketing that indies might be doing, and how indie authors specifically could capitalize on it.
Yeah, this is a really tough area too. And so first of all, what is it? I talk about PR as earned media as opposed to paid media. If I'm paying Facebook to promote my ad to people of a specific demographic group, that's paid media. If I am doing an interview for this podcast, for example, this would be an example of PR, where I'm being spoken to by somebody who is on their own getting the word out to other readers that I wouldn't normally connect with. So this, talking to you is an example of PR. It's not in the traditional sense, but really what's traditional anymore.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, and the challenges, and I think it's another gray area where, first of all, it includes everything from the interview in the New York Times, and wouldn't we all love that? But it's everything from that right down to maybe your neighborhood free weekly newspaper, or is there a podcast somewhere, or a that sort of thing. But the danger with PR is that people think, oh, I can just put out a news release and I can pay this PR Web or PR Newswire or whoever it is, a couple $100 or $1,500, depending on the length and whether you include images, and expect that that's going to bring me all kinds of media attention. Well, it doesn't. And there are books that make sense to spend time and effort on getting PR, and books that it doesn't make sense. Or there are elements of your book. So let's take a thriller, a fiction thriller set in a particular community. And so the story revolves, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go. The story revolves around a murder in the library. I don't know. And so you have to be aware of what elements you have in your book that are ripe for PR. The fact that you've written a book is not a good enough hook for trying to go out and seek media attention. The fact that you've published it's a wonderful accomplishment, don't get me wrong, but there's...
That's it, Boni, crush everyone's dreams.
I know. But it's just, there has to be some real hook that you can hang your PR outreach attempts on. Something that is going to be of interest to people well beyond the fact that you've written a book. Unless the book that you've written is so new and avant-garde that we've, bicycles for cats or something. If you've written a book about bicycles for cats, then, maybe
listeners,
that's
please don't write a book about
unique enough to get you some traction.
Don't write a book about cats and bicycles.
Yeah, it's funny. But so, and trying to get PR, it's a whole machine in and of itself. And I think that the sad part of it is that it's easy for us to get duped into thinking that, I'll do this media release and I'll pay for the distribution, because look, they're telling me that they're going to distribute my media release to 275 media outlets around the country, and I'm going to be seen on 12,740 websites. Well, it's a load of crap. That doesn't mean it only means they're pushing it across the desks. It doesn't mean that a reporter is actually going to pick it up and write anything about you. So I think that's one thing to be really careful of, and combining that with understanding, what it is about your book or what it is in your book that might be newsworthy or that you can turn into a newsworthy hook, and then leverage that. Did that answer the question you asked me, or did I prattle on and get completely carried away as I usually do?
I think so. Let me see if I've understood. So, for example, if you said that you were writing a historical novel that had some kind of true crime in it, but let's say somebody
No, it's a true story. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say somebody writes about a crime that happened in their local village, for example, or their local town or city, and they publish that. Would that then be kind of a news item that somebody could kind of pull out to go to the local papers to say, look, I've written this story, it's about this true crime, it's set here. Is that an example, or?
Yes, that would be an example. And what you'd want to do in that case is, first of all, how are you portraying that location?
Yeah.
So depending on how you portray the location, but let's say that it doesn't do anything negative to the location, and whether it's the library or a corner or a park or whatever. But so is there a historical society? Is this set in the past? I don't know. But is there a historical society? Is there a local tour operator? Is there, do you go and do a reading at the location where in the book your murder occurred? So making something happen that you're creating the hook around that is connected to your book is not a bad idea. So, okay, my murder happens at the corner of 4th and Vine, and so I, set up an event where I'm going to be at 4th and Vine, and I'm going to do a reading, and I'm going to, maybe you dress up get some people to play a couple of roles as characters, and then you pitch that to local media. That becomes a local event. And that gets people talking about your book and so that would be an idea.
So give me a couple of really tangible tips. How would an indie author without their own PR manager actually get PR?
Well, it's everything that we've been talking about here. So the first thing is that don't assume that you can just get it from the fact that you have written a book. And it depends on your book, and it depends on what's in your book. And so, it almost really does require some feedback from somebody who has done this before. So the first thing, if you have that hook, so I'm getting caught up on whether you have that hook or not. So let's move past the hook. I think this is what you're asking me. So then it is, you want to craft your story. You want to use that feeling, the story that is going to be in your media release, for example, and whether or not you issue the media release, in my view, you must write that media release because it is your story. So even if you're going to pitch one-on-one and you're not actually issuing a media release, I always advise write it anyway, because you want to get it right. You want to have that lead, catchy, grabby paragraph right off the top, and then you kind of dig into it from there. So the whole structure of how you write a media release, and then you decide who is the best candidate for me to send this to, and be realistic. There are local and community media outlets that are perfectly relevant PR opportunities for many people, and there are national and international media outlets that are going to be relevant for very few people. So be realistic when you're setting your target of where you actually want to get your attention and traction, and you build your contact list. It's just grunt work, finding out how you reach these people, and recognize that newsrooms and media outlets are extremely busy places. They receive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails. And so you need to be A, respectful, B, you need to be very clear on what the benefit is to that reporter or producer or whoever it is that you're pitching, why they should be interested, respect their time, and follow through. So those would be kind of the mechanical steps to go through.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was getting at as well. And I guess one of the other things, I suppose, is for you to have things prepared in advance. So they might ask for a call type sheet of your books, or that kind of.
Totally.
Yeah.
Your media kit. Yes.
Yes.
So you want to have your release written. You want to have your 1-page description of what the book is, who you are as an author. You want to have print ready and web friendly images, your book cover, your author photo. You want to have your contact info. You want to have, some people are creating business cards, designed that look similar to their books. Business cards or postcards or bookmarks or whatever it is. So there might be a product associated with that, or it could be all electronic. But so making sure that you have all your ducks in a row, you have everything you need together. The worst thing is to make the effort to outreach and oh my God, big surprise, you get a bite and then you're not ready. So yeah, you need to be ready with your kit.
Amazing. Thank you. And so this is the last question. This is always the last question. This is the Rebel Author podcast. So tell me about a time in your life where you were a rebel, or where your inner rebel came out to play.
Oh my God, I've always been playing with my inner rebel. That is so funny. Well, I don't want to shock people, so I'm not going to go back to my teenage and early 20s.
You can
years,
shock
so I'm
us.
not going to talk about it. Oh no, I'm not doing any of that. I'll do something a little safer till the next time we talk. Well, I had my very good, very well-paying management job in government communications, and I no longer wanted the life it gave me, and so I stopped. People were aghast. I quit, and I embarked out on my own to do my own thing. Took a huge risk. Took a huge financial hit. And people thought I was crazy, and I was crazy, but it was also the perfect thing for me to do at the time. I would not have the things in my life that I have now had I stayed. I would be financially better off, but I would not be as alive and enriched and in touch with myself and the things that I want out of my life.
Absolutely. I always think it's worth taking the risk because the benefits I'm trying not to get all philosophical, but when you take those big leaps of faith, good things always appear on the other side of your fear. So yeah, amen to that.
Yeah.
Right. Where can listeners find out more about you? www.ingeniumbooks.com. Ingenium is INGENIUMBOOKS, or in the sailing word Indio, November Golf Echo Ingene, November India Uniform Mike BOOKS.com. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Boni, for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody listening. And also thank you to everybody supporting on Patreon. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, then you can visit me on patreon.com/Sasha Black. That is Sasha with a C, SACHA. I'm Sasha Black, you were listening to Boni Wagner-Stafford, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'll be talking to Christina Stanley, CEO of Fictionary and Story Coach. We discuss all things self-editing. She has a rundown of her top 10 most common mistakes and how to fix them. It is a jam-packed episode full of writing craft and editing tips. Don't miss it. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.